Hello, I'm Nick Ori, consultant, Sage Intacct with DSD. Today we are going to go over importing into Sage Intacct. I guess on my intro, I've been with DSD going on 6 months, but I've done Sage Intacct for going on 7 years, implementing it. And if you can't tell, I am from Texas, so my accent is very heavy. So with that, we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the PowerPoint. So, a couple of things on this, and I'm not the biggest person on reading verbatim of what is in the PowerPoint. We provide these to you, so you can definitely come back through and look through them. A couple of high points that we're going to go over today is before I get to that, all of the Sage Intacct templates for importing in various data into Sage Intacct. There are within those files required data elements that you have to populate, or you will get an error file. And we'll touch base on, there is a do not import column. We'll look into that. It is very helpful in trying. That do not import column does help you avoid getting errors when you have a data set that maybe is blank. So with that, and then obviously on what I typically will do on a file is I will format it as text as opposed to any kind of numbering. That's just to ensure that there's no commas in the numbers, because you have to upload a CSV file, comma delimited. And so if you have a comma in it, Intacct's going to read that as any other system that imports CSVs as, oh, that's the next data set. So one of the big triggers on an error is going to be having a comma in your totals. And then we'll look at what an error file looks like, right? And kind of we'll touch base on a little bit of the GL detail imports. So we'll get there. So let's discuss what you can import. So within Sage Intacct, and this has to be an administrator that has company access, right? Every console, you will go to company setup, and then there will be an import link. Within that import link, again, the screenshots are going to show, hey, here's all the robust import templates that you can utilize for bringing in those data sets. Some of the big key ones is going to be a budget. I know we only do it once a year usually, but the imports for budgets is life-changing, I promise. Vendors, customers, updates for those AP vendors if you're paying them via direct deposit. 1099 balances. So, if you have a payroll system that is actually paying out contractors as opposed to running those through Intacct, then you can import in those 1099 transaction amounts. And then another big one that I forgot to include is the GL detail. It's journal entry imports. So, pardon me, where to import. So throughout Intacct, there are multiple ways to get to things, right? So in that, all of the imports will be on that company setup import data screen, which we'll look at here in a moment. However, there are other fields or other list views where you will have the import functionality. I'm sure almost everybody is aware, if you go to a general journal entry, and from that screen, there will be an import transactions button. On vendors, there's an import button. So You can also look in the list views to find where some of these imports are. What I will say is sometimes on those import screens from the list view, they won't have what's called a template on that import file. But all the templates will be on that import data screen. All right, budgets. So with budgets, lovely little thing on budgets. I've seen many a client have different budgets for each of their fiscal years. So they may have, fiscal year 2024, fiscal year 2025, and so on and so forth. Our recommendation is that you create one master budget, and you load in the various different years to that one master or current budget. The reason for this is, and if anybody has run into this, you'll have that, oh my gosh moment, is if you're loading it into a current budget or a master budget, that one budget year over year, then on your financial reports, when you run those, in the financial report writer, you have to designate what budget you're wanting the data to return to on the report. So if y'all have never used just the one budget, you'll know that at the turn of the new year, you have to change what budget those different various columns are going to pick up from. So case in point, if you had it by a different year, you'd have to, inevitably in January, you'd have to go, okay, this is the fiscal budget 2026 now. If you do it as one budget based on your reporting periods in those financial report writers, it will by default pick up those budgets. So that'll save you a lot of time having to update any of your financials. All right, so budget reports. And again, we're going to go through this here in a minute, I promise. So on the budget reports, this screen is going to kind of outline where you need to go within the budgets. Budgets are treated a little bit differently than all the other import files. They're just a little bit different on how they do it. So we have outlined kind of best practices for what your budget report that you need to run out of Intacct. And so typically we'll say, hey, grab January since we're in 2025, I know the screen says 2024, but if we were to do January 2025 and then your end period, I would set it to December of 2026 as your end period. I'll show that here in a minute, what that will look like, but that gets you those individual columns to where then you could very easily import in new budgets. So, import. Gosh, I lost my train of import results. I'm sorry. So I will be the first to acknowledge when I first started doing Sage Intacct, the error files from Sage Intacct are not the most helpful. Sometimes they're a little bit cryptic. Sometimes it's pretty crystal clear on what the issue could be. Nevertheless, when you're doing the imports, and I will stress this when we do the demo, there will be a checkbox for process offline. Highly recommend always checking that box. Nevertheless, in checking that box, the system will run that import in the background, and then it will email whoever is listed as the email when they're importing the results. If it passes, yay, it just sends you the, hey, you successfully imported a file. If there's any kind of failures on it, it will also say, hey, you had errors in this file. And more importantly, it will attach a CSV Excel file to that email of the records that had errors. So at DSD, whenever you run into that and you need to email us at support saying, hey, this file, I can't figure it out, something's wrong, we highly, highly recommend forwarding us the email you'll get from Sage Intacct that tells what the results are, and then also forwarding the CSV error file. That gives us context for maybe looking into it and seeing what went wrong with that file. Okay. So with that, I like to drive. So I am going to jump into Sage Intacct. Let's see here. Window. All right. Everybody should be able to see my screen. So this is my demo environment. And so we're going to kind of walk through. I want y'all to see, seeing is believing, where these import files are. So from your applications menu, if you go to company and on the setup tab under configuration, you'll see an import data. Again, this is going to be a permission based, right? Usually it's the administrator, the full administrator that has this ability, but a full business user can be allowed this functionality as well. So when we click on that, here's all the company setup checklist, right? Chart of accounts, statistical accounts, so on and so forth. It goes on and goes on and goes on and goes on, right? Now, again, this is my demo environment. So, in my demo environment, I have inventory. A lot of clients may not have inventory. So, but your core modules will be the same. And that is to say, on your company master list, these listings should be the same. General ledger transactions should relatively be the same. One thing that we do need to point out on this is you'll see it for budgets, but more to the vendors and 1099 transaction update. Anywhere there's an asterisk next to, that means that can be updated with an import. So that's to say, if you have a lot of vendors and you need to update them for various reasons, let's say, hey, we're switching everything to ACH, then you would be able to import in the vendor's direct deposit, routing, bank account, whatever information, and you can continually do that. You can override it every time. Because it has an asterisk, it is going to allow you to overwrite what's there. So it's just a notation of it is a updatable import. Okay. Within this, also, you'll see a create. So this is a create on the fly. That is no different than going into, for chart of accounts, if you went to the general ledger and went to chart of accounts and decided to add, that's exactly where it's going to take you. So when I click on create, this is where it's going to have, hey, here's your GL account that you can add on the fly. Okay. Import functionality, there is templates. So templates. Everything runs on templates within Intacct, right? I highly recommend downloading the templates anytime you're doing a new upload, if you will. Or also if you have custom fields. So if you enable a custom field within the vendor, right? Be it, I've seen a lot of Sage 100 clients want to capture their old Sage 100 vendor IDs. So we can create a custom field for that. When a custom field is created and associated with one of these areas, you do need to download a new template. That new template will have those custom fields added to it. So keep that in mind. If you're doing any kind of updates for it, you may want to download a new template for it. I happen to have a file that I have downloaded already. And so this is the general ledger journal entries. So one of the big things on this is going to be what are required fields. So there are specific pieces of this that are going to be required for you to have a successful upload. So the only way you really know that is if you download a template and you see in row 2 where it says required yes. What I like to do is I like to do a conditional formatting, and this is all free of charge, everybody. And we're going to say I want to do a highlight based on text that contains, and I'm going to say required semicolon yes. Okay. And everybody knows I cannot spell to save my life. Semicolon, yes. And we want to do that with a dark green. Okay. And that didn't work because I can't probably spell it. Let me just copy that. One moment. Apply. Okay. Well, I don't know what's wrong with I don't know why it's not conditionally formatting it. So again, sorry, it worked 2 seconds ago, and I don't know why it's not now. Nevertheless, I do highly recommend finding the way for the conditional formatting to highlight those. And again, that's going to give you the reference of, hey, here's a field that I have to update. I have to have in there. Okay. And then Intacct does a really fine job of kind of saying, hey, here's what the valid values are. Here's what the user interface field name is. I know this is kind of straightforward, date, and the user interface field is date. What I will tell you, never, ever, ever edit the column headers. Intacct keys off of the column headers. So do not edit column headers on these templates. Okay. So with that, budgets. This is one of the big things. It's a little bit different. You can get to it by going to budgets. And the first thing that I recommend is going to budgets and going to your reports. Again, you know, we're in 2025. We're nearing the end of 2025, right? And so in preparation for my budgets for 2026, I want to run a budget report. Okay. So on this, on your start period, I highly, highly, highly recommend grabbing month ended January 2025, and then your end period to be December 2026. Now, what I will tell you, if at any point while you're running this, if you don't see the next year's month end period of 2026, that's because your default periods have not been updated. Okay. In order to do that, I'm going to duplicate my tab real quick. Again, we're going to go into company, setup, and import data. And from here, we can go down to reporting periods. On reporting periods, there is a default icon. So if when you're running the budget, Intacct will create your reporting periods, your fiscal reporting periods based on your most recent data. So if the last time you had default periods created was in 2024, Intacct will create it for 2025, but not 2026. So if you're missing that ending period, come in, hit default. It will generate the 2026 budgetable periods. Okay. And it's pretty straightforward. It just says, hey, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create your budgetable periods, right? So, and it'll base it on your last entry date, if you will. Okay. So I had already done that. So yay me. I was able to go. Now I have this month end December 2026. For your accounts, again, your budget type, right? You can have various other budgets, but again, we recommend having that one budget type, master budget. And I think we're doing a webinar on budget, so I may be stealing somebody's thunder, but nevertheless, make sure you have that selected, have all accounts. It will default for all accounts. And then scrolling down, you want to make sure that you're picking up any of the dimension values that you are budgeting for, right? So obviously account ID, but moreover, if you're budgeting even down to the location and department and or class, whatever that is, this is where on your show dimension values, you want to make sure you select those. I have on my list view, the IDs followed by the name. That is only applicable if you do not click this box that says use CSV importable format. So on your initial run, what I recommend is not to click that. And then when we view this, it's going to show, hey, here's the account name, location name, department name, channel name. This would be more relevant for your key stakeholders that are doing the budget, you know, your department or division heads, to be able to know, hey, here's the name associated with an ID, right? So it gives them a little bit of insight into what they're looking for. Obviously, you can pop this out into Excel and filter by that relevant, location or department for that key stakeholder. But more importantly, you'll see all of 2025, then we get to 2026 and there's no data, which is okay. So when we go back and we click on use CSV import and we say export the CSV file, what that's going to do is it's going to have your GL account number, your department ID, location ID, class ID, and then even if you were doing budgets based on customer, vendor, employee, so on and so forth, it'll have those. Now, again, if you're not in Intacct all the time, you may not know what location ID 120 is, right? So that's why I'll run the report without the CSV file for import, just to give them context for how that's relatable to the ID. But nevertheless, what ends up happening is with this import file, again, this is where you're not going to want to edit these headers because it's account ACCT_NO for account number, right? Do not edit those. The big piece of this is you'll see month end January 2025 all the way through December. Then you get to January 2026. What I would typically do is after they work up the new budget, I would populate those new fields, those new periods, right? And I would come in and I would delete the current year budgetable information. Okay. So luckily I have already done that in another Excel file. And so here is, month end January 2026, so on and so forth. Now, fingers crossed on this. I've had, it's been kind of a thorn in my side that sometimes when I do imports on live, it just doesn't go well for me sometimes, but we're going to give it a shot. So I have that 2026 budget created. I'm going to do an import. Again, luckily on this import, it shows download templates. Sometimes on other fields, it won't. You'd have to go to the setup checklist to find those. Nevertheless, choose your file. Has to be a CSV file. Okay. So I've selected my 2026 budget import. Your date format, right? Depends on if you have dates in it and selecting what is the relevant date format within there. On the budgets, it will run offline. Budgets always run offline. Here in a minute, I'm gonna go ahead and import this, and then I'm gonna go to another import and show you where you want to select the icon to process it offline. So I'm gonna hit import here, and it's gonna say, hey, we'll send the results to you once we're done. Again, to switch back over, if we did general ledger import entries, which is a very popular one, again, you'd find your file, date format, and again, this radio button of process offline. Again, I highly recommend doing that because then you will get that file that says whether or not it passed or failed. Okay. You can see, if you're an administrator, you can see where you're at in the process. So if you go to company, admin, offline, job queue, you'll see that here's the budget file that I have queued up. Again, it's going to take it, depends on Intacct. Sometimes it does it quick. Sometimes it takes several minutes. I have zero control over that. Let's see if it does it. Okay, it may take too long. So you'd think I would learn by now not to do live imports on live webinars. At any rate, I do have a file that I'm going to bring over. So this was my initial import file. And again, I did not create those default periods for 2026. So when I imported it in, it said, hey, Intacct error notification, right? You have errors. Here's the file. And then down in the body of the email, this is where sometimes it's very straightforward, sometimes it's not. So the following header column is not valid, month end January 2026. Again, That's because I had not created those default periods yet. Okay, so that's what those errors specific to this would be. I will say some of these errors are not super crystal clear. And so if you've run into a dead end and you can't get to get the files to import, let us know, reach out to us. The last thing I wanted to show, I'm going to switch back to your general journal ledger. So on your general journal ledger, on almost every import excluding budgets, in column A, there is a do not import. So what that's going to signify is if you have the hash, what Intacct is going to do is it's going to completely skip over that row. What I typically do in my data, if I'm grabbing it from a third-party source, I'll write a formula in this cell for each cell row that says, hey, if this is blank, then put a hash. If it isn't blank, leave it blank. Again, that's to direct Intacct to say, hey, you can skip this column. Okay. And so keep that in mind, right? Is if you have blank rows in your data set for like a journal entry, you are going to get an error because again, Intact's going to read that blank and go, something's wrong here. Okay, so keep that in mind. And with that, I think I went fast enough. I talked fast for a Texan, I guess. And so at any rate, I am gonna flip it back over. Do we have any questions, any comments?
Yes, we did get a question. It was early on. So someone asked, can you import employee cost rates? I need to update cost rates for annual increases for 120 employees.
I'll be honest with you, I've never had to update the employee cost rates. I will tell you what, we'll get your name, your email,
Yes.
all the things. Let me test that just to make sure if it does have that functionality or not.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think that will be the last question since we're exactly at the top of the hour. So thank you so much to everyone, and thank you, Nick, for your amazing presentation. Again, if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us via info@DSD Inc. And yes, thank you so much, and have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.